Hello and welcome everyone to this East West Railway Company online session with your neighbouring parishes and councillors along the north of Cambridge and north of South Cambridgeshire as well. My name is Jordi Vesquich and I'm one of the engagement managers here at East West Railway Company. And we're pleased that you can join us tonight to this second meeting following on from the one that we held back in April on the first week of consultation. As advised on the invitation for this event, the session today is an opportunity for you to raise any questions that you or your residents might have on the proposals that we're consulting on, now that you've had a chance to read through the documents, and also we're guessing that residents will have been in touch with you as well. And basically, we just want to ensure that we've tackled your key questions before you can submit responses to the consultation. Ahead of today's session, we asked you to let us know if there were any questions or issues that you wanted us to address during the meeting. Thank you to those of you who've submitted questions. If you haven't, don't worry. There will be plenty of time to raise questions during the Q&A. And to let you know that we're also holding similar sessions with all the parishes and councillors within the consultation zone between Oxford and Cambridge throughout this week. In terms of structure tonight, so we'll start with a presentation that will run for around 30 minutes, in which basically we're just briefly going to recap on what we're consulting on in your area, as well as touch on some of the questions that have been raised to us so far during the consultation, including yours, but also from live chats and public webinars and correspondence that we've been receiving. Then we're going to move on to a Q&A that's going to last for around 50 minutes before we wrap up, touching on some next steps. So overall, the session should run for around 90 minutes. Before I go on, I truly apologize if the sound is sounding poorly. I'm going to get closer and hopefully this will address the issue. Apologies about that. In terms of who am I joined with tonight, they're going to introduce themselves in a second, but there are several colleagues with me tonight, as well as a couple from ACOM and Barley who are supporting us with this session. And before we start with the presentation, I'm just going to quickly run you through some brief housekeeping before we move on. And basically key things, so many of you by now will be very familiarized with the platform that we're using, but just as a reminder, you'll find in the bar below your screen different features, which include the buttons to mute and unmute yourself, as well as sharing your camera, opening the chat window, or checking the list of participants. We're also going to ask you to please keep yourself muted at all times, unless you're given the floor during the Q&A, to avoid some unpleasant echoey noises. And we'd also be grateful if you could rename your username to display your full name if your Zoom account doesn't show your actual name already. If you experience any technical issues during the meeting, and please email contact@eastwestrail.co.uk. We're going to be monitoring the inbox, and if, for example, you dropped out of the meeting, we would then try to get you back in if you couldn't get back. In terms of the Q&A that I've mentioned, so in the Q&A session, we will aim to address all your questions, and any that we won't get to answer, because, for example, we run out of time, we'll take away and follow up by email afterwards. During the Q&A, if you want to ask a question, please indicate so by pressing the raise your hand button, which you can find at the bottom right of the participants list, or at the within reactions at the bottom right of your bar below the screen, depending on the version of Zoom that you're using. And last but not least, the current session is being recorded, and together with the slides that you're going to see in a second are going to be both available on our website next week. Now, before we start with the consultation, just very quickly, I'm going to show you who's joining you tonight, who have we invited to this session. And so if we could have the slides, I can quickly show you.
Jordi, could you just introduce yourself, please? I didn't catch who you are. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, yes, hi, Hannah. So I'm Jordi Vescovic. I'm one of the engagement managers here at East West Railway Company. And I truly apologize by the sort of poor reception that some people were getting from me. Hopefully this is better now. It's been fine so far, but it seems like not to be working that well today, and seem now to have the slides brilliant. So we can quickly go on to 4 slides in, so we can quickly show the maps, and then I'll hand it over to Will. So we've covered that, and then so basically these are all the parishes that we have invited tonight. Then the next slide, we'll see the different ward councillors that we've invited in terms of like the areas that they cover, and on the next slide, the county councillors and the electoral divisions that they represent as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Will, who will now take us through the presentation.
Thank you. And for those of you who don't know me, my name's Will Gallagher. I'm the Strategy and Sponsorship Director for East West Railway Company. So as some of you may know, if we flick onto the next slide, we are, we have launched a 10-week consultation back on the 31st of March, running through to the 9th of June. And what we're going to do today is give you a very brief recap of what we're consulting on, because I know a number of you will be very familiar with it, but some people will be coming relatively new to this. We've had a series of key themes and questions that have come up in events that we've been doing, so we thought it would be helpful to sort of answer some of those questions as part of our presentation. Say a little bit about how your communities can get involved in the consultation that we're going through at the moment, but actually leaving most of today's session to give you the opportunity to ask us questions directly so that we can answer those. So if we move into the next set of slides, consultation underway through to the 9th of June, and again onto the next slide. And what you'll see is that we are consulting on, yes, a series of infrastructure interventions all the way from Oxford to Cambridge in order to allow us to deliver that full Oxford-Cambridge service. But also, we're very keen to get people's feedback on the type of customer experience and train service that they want, so that in parallel with developing the infrastructure, we really can develop the operations of the railway as well. So moving on to the next slide, probably just worth talking you through the fact that we do have a consultation zone. That's what's highlighted in the blue area there. Everybody in that zone has had from us a short summary document covering the consultation, and we're doing a lot to promote the consultation to people in these areas and encouraging them to participate. And we're holding events like these to make sure that people and their local representatives have the information that they need in order to be able to participate fully in the consultation. As we move on to the next slide, we thought it was just worth zooming in a little bit before we talk about the infrastructure on the customer experience and the railway operations, because we do know it is important to deliver. Ultimately, the reason for building the infrastructure is to deliver a really good service to people. And that's not just at the station or on board the train in isolation, but actually thinking about the whole end-to-end journey that people have from starting to plan their travel all the way to returning home again. And what we know from our research, as shown on the next slide, is that there are a few areas that are particularly important. The train service, so the number of trains per hour, the times of day the train runs, all of those sorts of things, really important. The station experience, the on-the-train experience, particularly the interactions that people have with members of the railway team who are providing that service to them, and the all-important customer information, so the means by which people get live, reliable information that allows them to make decisions, allows them to understand what's going on, and doesn't need them to be being told 2 or 3 things that don't quite match up all at the same time. So definitely keen to get people's feedback on the things that they want us to do in these areas to help improve the quality of service that you traditionally get on the railway, so that we do really set a new benchmark in the customer experience that we offer. As we move on to the next slide, this is where we get into talking about the the infrastructure interventions. As you can see, a set of interventions all the way from Oxford through to Cambridge, and particularly today's focus will be on that approach into Cambridge over on the sort of right-hand side of your screen. So as we flick into that, let's first of all just have a sort of conversation about the sort of alignment options that get you there. So section D of our consultation, and this is the section, if we flick onto the next slide, that takes you basically from Bedford, so leaving north of Bedford, across towards the East Coast Main Line, where there'll be a station either at St Neots or at Tempsford, and there are a couple of options at both St Neots and Tempsford, and then a series of options that head across to Camborne, with 2 options at Camborne, either a Camborne North station or a Camborne South station. And with Camborne North, all of our alignments follow the new 428, the A428 road across to Camborne North. There is an option to take that route also to Camborne South, but we've also included as well those 2 lines that you can see heading diagonally across from Tempsford and St Neots across to the Camborne South station. And from there, our current proposal is that we head south and approach Cambridge from the south. And you can see that those are the 5 shortlisted options. So all there for consultation, all there for people to comment on. But we do have an emerging preference for stations at Camborne North. And that reflects the emerging analysis that we've been doing. We've set out why the analysis is pointing us in that direction, because through the 15 assessment factors, those options do seem to perform better. But all 5 are on the table in this consultation. We just thought it was more transparent to let people know that that's where the analysis was pointing at this stage. So as we move on to the next slide, one of the things that we thought was sort of worth reflecting on was the approach into Cambridge once you leave Camborne. As we have an emerging preference for Camborne North, we have historically said that the approach that we want to take into Cambridge is from the south. So you can see that as the blue line there, joining the King's Cross line in the sort of Hawkston area. We have had a number of representations to consider approaches into Cambridge from the north. That's the mustard line that's showing there. We have, as I say, our initial preference was to come in from the south. We did back check that decision once we expressed an emerging preference for Camborne North. And having done that sort of review, we set this out in Appendix F of the technical report to the consultation that we're live in now. We have satisfied ourselves that we don't need to revisit the approach to Cambridge coming from the south, and that blue line is the right thing to do. I think it is worth saying, and you'll probably be aware, that there are quite a number of campaigns at the moment in terms of asking us to reconsider that decision. As I say, we've set out the analysis for why approaching Cambridge from the south is our preference, and that is because it is marginally shorter and has marginally quicker journey times to take the blue route there. It requires us to build less infrastructure on floodplains, and that requires significantly less work in terms of foundations and earthwork stabilization. Coming into Cambridge from the south also means we have to demolish acquire and demolish many fewer properties, and we think there are greater benefits of serving Cambridge, a South Station, particularly given Northstowe is already relatively well served by public transport via the guided busway, amongst other things. So those are some of the reasons why we have set out our preference for Camborne North. But as I say, you will have seen that there is a campaign for us to look at that northern approach again. As we move on to the next slide, what we wanted to do was pick up a number of the questions that have been put to us in advance or that have come up during the public consultation. And having answered those questions, we'll then open the floor to a wider Q&A, so you can ask anything you like. We've got our team of experts here to help. So if we move on to the next slide, is a northern route to Cambridge being actively considered? So if we move on to the next one. First question, will we be reconsidering approaching Cambridge from the north? So look, we have set out our analysis in terms of what approaching Cambridge from the north would look like. That is in our technical report, Appendix F. And we have said that we think the approach coming in from the south is the right one, even based upon that analysis. Now, that is our preference. I think the one thing it is just worth saying is that, if new information comes to light, or if we hear new representations through the consultation, then of course every decision that we take at this stage is only a preference until we get to the DCO submission, where we actually commit to the scheme that we're submitting to. Then we will need to take new information into account. So, we do have a preference for the south, but just so that people are aware, there's also an ongoing obligation on us to continue to back check those decisions. In relation to the second question, which is surely a train should go via the new town of Northstowe, this is where the population is growing significantly in order to have good transport links. So I think it is fair to say that if you were to do a route to Cambridge from the north, then you would no doubt put a station probably at Oakington to serve the development at Northstowe. I think our view as to why the benefits of that are don't outweigh the benefits associated with taking a southern approach and calling it Cambridge South is that Northstowe has been proposed and consented on the basis of the transport links that it has. And when we looked at the kind of service that Northstowe has from the guided busway, it would be a similar sort of journey time and a similar sort of frequency to that which East West Rail would offer, and therefore would be more duplicative than complementary as a public transport option. So again, these are it's another reason why we concluded that the south was the right option. As we move on to the next slide, there's some questions about the environment, and again, if we pick up the specific question we've been asked here, will services be diesel or electric? I think the thing to say here is that there hasn't yet been a decision made by government. This is a decision for government. We are doing the analysis work right now on electrification and how that would work. We're also looking at emerging technologies in terms of hybrid, so therefore partially electrifying the line, partially relying upon a battery technology as well, and what the technology trajectory looks like on that, how battery technology is developing, and will it allow us to deploy that? And there are a number of reasons why you might do that, because one, it is cheaper to deliver probably, and it's also less visually intrusive as well. So we are looking at a set of options on what the right traction power is, but we're really clear. Our ambition is to be a net zero carbon railway, and that's not really compatible being having diesel trains, particularly given that diesel-only trains will not be allowed on the rail network after 2040. And so, our aim is to be a net zero carbon railway, as we introduce the service. So that's where we're, that's what we're looking to achieve. As we move on to the next slide, we've also got some questions about consultation and the approach that we're taking. If we move on and look at those questions, some people have asked us whether we'll extend the consultation to allow for face-to-face events. I think in this area, we have had, a lot of people visit our virtual consultation rooms. A lot of people come to events like this and participate in our live Q&A, sort of live chat events where people can ask our experts one-to-one their direct questions. And so we do feel we have provided, over that 10-week period, a good opportunity for people to get involved in that consultation. That's certainly being borne out in terms of the consultation responses that we are getting, and therefore, we don't at the moment see there is a case to extend the consultation, particularly as the sort of timing around face-to-face events is uncertain, and we have run what we believe is an effective consultation and is compatible with the guidance for projects that are having to run consultations in the circumstances in which we're in right now. Some people were asking how we will analyse feedback from consultation and rank the concepts. Again, here, just want to reassure you that every single piece of consultation feedback that we get will be read individually, and then the comments will be brought together by themes, and we will take those into account. So the way we are selecting our options is on the basis of 15 assessment factors. These are set out in quite a bit of detail, and the application of those assessment factors is set out in quite a bit of detail in our technical report. As we move towards responding to the consultation and submitting for statutory consultation, we will update that analysis, and that analysis will draw on the consultation feedback that we've had. So the feedback that we've had will be built into our assessment of those 15 factors, and that will be sort of set out. We will also, publish the, a summary feedback report, as well as the direct reports of the prescribed consultees, and respond to the consultation in that way. Now, and I think that gets to the answer of the final question on this slide. When will we know the outcomes from this consultation? Well, we will respond to the consultation, and also we will then take the work forward to a statutory consultation, which will happen in about a year's time. So it is over that sort of timescale that people will know the outcome of the consultation. As we move on to the next slide, really just a quick reminder about the way communities can get involved and the people that you represent can get involved. The virtual consultation rooms are open. We've got many thousands of visitors to those consultation rooms. That's where you'll find the full list of documents and maps and all those sorts of things. We've got a series of live chat events that are open to the public, where people can ask their questions direct to our experts. I think one of those is happening actually right now, and we've got another 4 taking place between now and the end of the consultation, primarily the rest of this week and next week, for people to ask their questions directly. There's also a dedicated phone line for those who don't want to or aren't able to engage online, so they can speak direct to members of our team, and the number is there for you to sort of take note of. That number is also on all of our literature and our website. And then, of course, the all-important feedback form. There is an online version, and we are encouraging people to use the online version, but also it is possible, I think, as we'll show you a little bit later, to respond via email or indeed via free post as well. So as we move on to the next slide, this just gives you some of the dates of the live chat events. So on Saturday between 2 and 4, and then next week on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday opportunities for people to ask our experts via that live chat. As we move on, again, I think this is just the reminder, as I was saying, that you can submit your feedback online. You can email us, consultation@eastwestrail.co.uk, or they can be posted to us as well, free post East West Rail. If people have got any more questions or want a paper copy of the form or anything else like that, do please email us or give us a call, and we'll be only too happy to help. So I think that gets to the end of the kind of main content that we wanted to cover and make sure we'd summarised for you today. But it's probably worth now taking the slides down, and we can open up the event for people to ask us their questions directly.
So far during the presentation, there hasn't been any questions raised in the chat, but there we go, one out of the bat. So Francis, Francis, if you're in the call, you can raise it yourself. Otherwise, I can read it, no problem.
I'm happy for you to read it. It's fine.
Yeah, okay. Question from Francis is, what's the rationale for entering Cambridge from long routes which are not direct both north and south? The most logical north route would be from Camborne along the south side of A428 and A14 to Cambridge North via CRC and Science Park. It is more direct, offers a quicker service, and reduces pollution, noise, and nuisance to residential areas. I'm not sure if Will and maybe Paul want to pick this one.
So I think Paul is probably better able to answer this on a sort of technical basis, but I do know we have looked at a range of options, and part of the challenge is will be the engineering of how we're actually able to join the line. But I will hand over to Paul on that one.
Yes, so there are a number of things that we need to take into account for an alignment such as that. Environment being one, the proximity to the American cemetery being another, and particularly impact to potential sight lines there, although I appreciate the 428 goes past there. The complex interchange around where the M11, A14, A1307 would be complex to be able to get the railway across, given that we have constraints in terms of the gradients that we can use. And then there would be additional impacts on houses as we go past Girton and Impington to come round. So it's a very complex route. And it wouldn't really perform particularly well against the assessment factors that we have that include everything from not just capital costs, but transport user benefits, environment, safety. So that's the reason why we didn't take an option for that forward for the northern approach.
Both. Next one, Judith.
Thank you for that presentation, and I concur with your reasoning behind the routes that you're suggesting coming into Cambridge from the south. One of the ones which I query though is why came Camborne North as opposed to Camborne South as your preference, especially since the Camborne North route on your map would cut across Bourne Airfield, which has just got outline planning permission for new homes, a new development. So it seems like you'd be knocking down brand new homes. And so I don't understand why your reasoning is Camborne North as opposed to Camborne South.
So we've looked at a range of options, and as Paul said, we do have these 15 assessment factors, which is what allows us to make some of these decisions. As I've said, this is an emerging preference at this stage. This is not a sort of final sort of decision, but it was just pointing at where the analysis was going. And there are a number of factors to take into account. So serving Camborne North is a little bit more cost effective than serving Camborne South in terms of the engineering. It also does seem to perform better, and I know this is challenging, but it does seem to perform better in terms of the way it supports sort of the growth and development of Camborne, and that is even taking into account the fact that we do clip the edge of the Bourne Airfield development. I think it is one of those areas where, as we continue to refine the designs, we'll do everything we can to avoid knocking down any homes. But overall, still the northern Camborne site does perform better in terms of the sort of support for that wider economic growth. So it is for that set of reasons that we've concluded that on the application of our assessment factors, that it is our emerging preference. But as I say, both options are there in the consultation, and no doubt people will make representations that Camborne South is the right choice, and those are representations we will take into account.
Sorry, it just seems absolutely crazy to go through a brand new development and potentially knock down houses that have only just been built. Okay, thank you.
The list was Aileen.
Thank you. Clearly, you've estimated the impact of various decisions, like number of houses that would have to be destroyed, going across floodplains, and at the moment that you've not ruled out the northern route, but it does seem to be the less favourable one. Do all these impacts in your calculations, do they have various weightings? And are these weightings likely to change if you later decide that the northern route could be another almost favourable option? For example, the numbers of houses destroyed and other impacts. I just want to understand whether those the weighting applied to those impacts could change as things evolve.
So we don't have a, I'll put this up, we don't have a quantified weighting. We make a qualitative assessment on the application of the 15 assessment factors. Sort of relating to our decisions around the approach to the north, as you've rightly said, it isn't our preference. We have back-checked the analysis to suggest that that confirms we shouldn't approach Cambridge from the north. But if new information does come to light, which changes our application of those assessment factors, so if the way they performed against the assessment factors did change, then that could change the decision. But as I say, where we are today, we haven't heard anything that has led us to think that would be the case.
Okay, thank you.
Next one on the list, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you, Will, and thank you for the presentation. I'm looking back at a comparison of factual data, and you mentioned 15 criteria that you used to compare the south and the north routes. I mean, I just wanted to, what were the reasons for choosing so far, or for preferring so far, the southern route to the northern route? Can you just run through what those reasons were?
So when we've looked at it, it doesn't perform as well on journey time. It doesn't perform so well on, it's a shorter route to come in from the south. In terms of the kind of earthworks that we need to do, the length of sort of viaduct that will need to be built in the floodplain in the north. That is a challenge in terms of, you know, earthwork stabilization, the kind of the viaducts that we need to build in that area, the environmental impact, the visual impact of the viaducts that we would sort of need to build in that area as well. Also, and I think this is quite an important factor, you know, our analysis is clear that we would need to four-track the West Anglia main line from where we join the West Anglia main line into Cambridge. So that would require us to acquire and demolish a much higher number of properties, taking the approach from the north, somewhere between 40 and 80 properties compared to only 5 when we approach from the south. And that it would also sort of link to that require us to remodel Cambridge North Station as well. And when you look at all those things in the round, and you look at the fact that, you know, we think there are benefits to serving Cambridge South Station and the biomedical campus there, whereas Northstowe does have transport links that exist already with a similar journey time and frequency. You know, when you put all of those things in the round, you know, that does lead you to conclude that the southern option is the better one. And as I say, we do set out in Appendix F, you know, that analysis in a bit more detail. Well, a lot more detail, 50 odd pages of it.
Thank you. And that included the number of properties within 200 metres of the alignment, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Thank you.
I'll briefly just mention that, like, kind of a full analysis was covered on Appendix F of the technical report, but kind of like it's pretty long, and we've also produced a fact sheet that I think in 12 pages summarizes the sort of the review of the approach into Cambridge, and kind of includes like a very useful table, which kind of like compares key points of both. We'll include the link to the fact sheet in the chat in a second. Then a next question. I think Fiona was before Anna. So if but that was not the order, apologies. But I think like Fiona went first. Fiona, please.
Thank you. It's really just another question about choosing Camborne North. It just seems to me that the main reason for choosing Camborne North is the potential for development there, because the landowners seem to be very eager to supply their land for this purpose. At the moment, we're told that Cambridge is in danger of being overdeveloped. We all know that London used to be a series of villages, and there is a real risk of Cambridge expanding and expanding. So another point is that if you're a resident in Camborne, as it is at the moment, are you really going to want to cycle north and cross the 428 to get to your station? Would you not rather have a pleasanter cycle ride to a southern station in Camborne? So really, this is just observations, perhaps, rather than questions, but thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, Fiona. I think that you know, wherever you put the station in Camborne, it was going to be really important to think about how you connect people to that in terms of cycling and walking, so that the station is easily accessible, you know, and that, you know, depending on whether there is development north of the 428, you know, that ultimately, you know, I think our analysis suggests that, you know, that is an opportunity, but you know, for me, the decisions on housing are not really for me, or for the East West Railway company. So I do hear your point on that, but they're probably more conversations for the Ministry of Housing and local authorities and those sorts of things. But the one thing I can reassure you of is in terms of how we try to plug the station wherever it's located into the wider transport network and into the sort of active transport network around cycling and walking. We are thinking about that very purposefully.
Thank you.
Then next one on the list, Anna Brandman. Oh, sorry, we just...
You've already had me. I think
yeah,
it's
sorry. It was apologies about that. The next one, it's a written question. It's from Firu. Again, if I can read it, if not, Firu can read it herself. But I'll go ahead. It's you mentioned this route will be electric, but Grand Chaps announced on TV that this line would be diesel. Will this be diesel or electric?
So the government hasn't made a decision on electric or diesel. Sorry, in terms of on electrification. What we are clear on is that we are our ambition is to be a net zero carbon railway. And there can't be any diesel only trains on the railway from 2040 onwards. And we are right now looking at, as I say, electrification technology, also hybrid technology as well. And certainly the impetus we're getting from the Department for Transport is they want us to find a low carbon solution to traction here. I do know that Grant Shapps might have been asked about the first stage of the railway, which we are opening by 2025 between Oxford and Milton Keynes. And in that area, the railway is likely to be diesel, but that is only because we thought it was better to introduce the service as quickly as possible and allow people to use the public transport options rather than getting in their cars. But that is on a temporary basis such that we can actually do the work on what the right traction power is for the long-term sort of green energy solution for East West Rail, so that we can introduce that by the time we open the full Oxford-Cambridge Railway.
Drew, you want to follow up on that, or that addresses your question? If not, we'll move on to the next one, which is Marcus.
Yes, hello. Thank you. My residents are very concerned about sending 24/7 freight traffic from Felixstowe through the city centre of Cambridge, also in the middle of the night, on that railway line. So how are you going to prevent noise pollution coming from this new railway? And second, have you considered some of the new rail technologies that exist in continental Europe that actually minimize noise, at least the rail tracks that minimize noise, at least from the wheels? Or are you, as you laid out, pursuing a low-cost option in order to get this railway done quickly?
So look, we are currently looking at the full range of sort of options around how we mitigate noise. We are looking at the sort of type of track technology that you can use, as well as, again, the type of rolling stock that you use. And all of these things, it's a cost benefit analysis that you take. And I do appreciate how important reducing the noise of the railway is. And as I say, we are looking around the world at the technologies that would allow us to do that. So we absolutely are. In terms of freight, it is possible that freight uses the railway. And we've said that it's likely that it would be about one freight train per hour. I think that is actually mainly constrained by the capacity of the infrastructure, sort of from Felixstowe or Harwich. And so there may well be some freight on the railway, but again, we're doing the work to understand what that is, so that if it were to happen, we're able to mitigate that as much as we possibly can. And in terms of our hours of operation, I think we've been clear that we don't envisage it being 24/7 operation. So, I think it's, we certainly don't envisage freight using the railway through the middle of the night.
I want to follow up on that, Marcus.
No, just to ask whether your company will be absorbed into the Great British Rail company, or whether you will still be. So can we trust anything you say on this call, or will you be morphed into a much bigger organization very soon?
Well, the one reassurance I can give you is that we are explicitly mentioned in the white paper on Great British Railways, being clear that East West Railway Company will be continuing in its role.
Next one on the list is, I think, we've covered freight. Melanie as well on freight. Neil, next one.
Yeah, so I have a question about the actual consultation, and particularly around the Northern Route. Can you give us assurance that you will not be swayed by the number of consultation responses you get, which are against the Southern route and pro the Northern route?
So we're clear that a consultation is not a referendum. It doesn't work like an election. It's not who gets most votes wins. What we do take into account is the other points expressed, and that is the key thing. The weight of opinion does matter, but as I say, it isn't it isn't an election that this route got more votes than that route, and therefore that's the route that we go for. It's one of the reasons why we have those 15 assessment factors, because there are quite a complex set of considerations that need to come into play in order for us to make an informed decision.
So if I can follow up, so you mentioned the weight of opinion mattering. So obviously the residents in the north have been part of a consultation process which doesn't actually have a northern route in it apart from Appendix F. So would you advise us to increase the weight of participation from our residents?
So we have been clear that the right thing to do was to include those areas that might be affected by a northern route in the consultation zone, because our consultation does include analysis on a northern approach into Cambridge. It does so to say that we don't think it's not our preference, but it does include that analysis. And I think if people do have views on that analysis, if they're in our consultation zone, in fact, no matter where they are, I would encourage people to respond to the consultation.
So I think I take that as a yes, we should be actively encouraging our residents.
We want people to respond to the consultation. It's why we're doing it. The more feedback we can get, the better, in terms of it helps us build the right railway.
But you still won't be using the weight of opinion as the driving force in terms of the.
But
it's the argument.
It isn't a referendum in terms of counting the votes. No, that's not how it works.
Okay, so we won't expect a consultation summary which has X people favoured the southern route, X people favoured the northern route being part of the feedback.
So feedback reports do normally, as they reflect where we had more responses or fewer responses and those sort of things, because we do have to reflect that in our feedback. But in terms of the way we take consultation responses into account, it is to the extent that they inform the application of our 15 assessment factors. That's the key thing.
Yeah, and I think that sort of, X said this, Y said that, Z said this, it's fine if all of the routes are expressed in the consultation, but we're not actually faced with that. This is part of the problem I think we face as councillors for the northern route, is that it's not on a sort of even footing in terms of the reaction of our residents to the consultation. So, that's where I think it becomes a little difficult then to take the sort of number of responses into account.
As I say, it isn't a referendum, so I can provide you some assurance on that. But as I say, we will do our we'll do our best to sort of set out the kind of responses that we've got, but it is the extent to which they inform our application of the 15 assessment factors.
Okay, thank you.
Next one is Tom.
Sorry?
Thank you, Geordie. So I'm Councillor Tom Biger. I represent Girton, Dry Drayton and Madingley. Obviously, my constituents are very concerned about the possibility of a northern route. And one of my sort of main concerns there is the very high quality of countryside that sits in between Dry Drayton and Madingley, and just protecting some of the most beautiful villages in Cambridgeshire. So I've got sort of a question and observation really. So if you were to choose the northern route, which side would you demolish the houses on the left-hand side between Cambridge North and Cambridge, or the right-hand side? And would the leper chapel of St Mary Magdalene be protected? So that's the first question. And the second question is really to do with electrification. And one of the issues with electrification is that one of the main costs is actually raising all bridges. And so if a hybrid solution were chosen, where you have batteries on board the trains and they charge up under the wires, and then they use that electricity when there are no wires, does it not make sense to put the wires up where you're building new line, rather than having to demolish the existing bridges on the existing lines?
Let me pick up the electrification one, and I will I'll hand over to Paul for the sort of the point about demolitions. So in relation to electrification, you're absolutely right that one of the advantages of a hybrid solution is that you don't have to put wires where it is difficult or costly to do so, and that is where bridges are a particular concern. Now, there are some instances where, sort of as electrification technology has developed, it has been possible to reduce the clearances so that you don't have to raise all the bridges but you can still get the wires under them. But you're right, one of the advantages of that new technology that battery makes possible is that you don't have to deal with some of the most complex engineering challenges in terms of bridges. So you're absolutely right to sort of point that out. It does mean building where you're building it new is the easiest place to do it. One of the other things that it does allow you to take into account is the visual impact of the gantries. So you put them in places where you can reduce the visual impact of what you do as well. So we'd certainly be looking at that. I'll hand over to Paul in terms of your point about sort of demolitions.
Thanks.
Yes, so at the moment, there are options of how you would get into Cambridge from the north. And the reason why we've given a range of houses that would be required to be demolished is because it's looking at options that have tracks both on one side or split tracks across the two. And it's taken those into account as a pro and a con of each of those solutions. If you were to completely, I'll caveat this question slightly, this answer slightly, but if you were to completely avoid, for example, the Chapel of Mary Magdalene, as you highlighted, which is on the east side of the railway, by putting both tracks on the west side, then the number of demolitions substantially increases. If you were to look at a solution where you put a track either side, then you are getting much closer to the chapel. But actually, that's not the only impact. What we have ascertained through the analysis so far is that the A1134 overbridge, as we call it, because it's going over the railway, only accommodates a twin track railway at the moment. And as you will know, it's actually two bridges on two different levels. That site would need to be widened, and therefore that bridge would have to be demolished and rebuilt. And that alone could cause some impacts. We haven't got anywhere near the detailed analysis of how that would look in terms of laydown areas and construction site areas in that site. But that is one of the factors that really doesn't lend the northern approach to being a particularly viable approach, particularly when you look at the south, when you are travelling on the West Anglia Main Line to come in from the south. The bit that's in the most built up area is a 3-track railway today and used to be a 4-track railway in the past. So it's just a case of reinstalling the 4th track. Well, not quite as simple as that, but the concept is.
So it's fair to say that going through the northern route creates huge amounts of additional engineering challenges. And, given that the Chapel of St. Mary Magdalene was built in 1125 and is one of the oldest buildings in the east of England to still be fully intact with the roof, that northern route would create really significant extra problems for the railway.
It would certainly add to the complexity of build, no doubt. Yes, and I think that's one of the things that is key to that northern approach into Cambridge again, is actually the technical complexity, but also the risk that is introduced to the overall schedule to be able to deliver on time, because you will not be able to demolish each of the bridges at the same time. You'll have to do it sequentially, because each bridge is going to be its own. The other bridges that are open will be the alternative routes that you will need to use in order to maintain connectivity. Would mean that you've got quite a long program. And that whole site with Barnwell Lake just to the south as well, all of it, and then Colton's Common, it's all a very, very tricky site. So our analysis so far has shown it's tricky, but we're not at the point to say, we haven't, I don't think it's even necessary to get to the point to be able to say exactly what it would look like and how tricky it would be, because we can see just from the impacts of putting the new lines in there, it's going to be hard and substantially harder. So that comparative when comparing to the south.
And the issue of having to reverse trains out of Cambridge that are headed to Norwich through the northern route, would that create a significant amount of timetable disruption because it takes up more space in a timetable to reverse a train out of the Cambridge than it would if it were able to just come in from the south and go in the same direction?
Yeah, it's I think the way that we've described it to people is it's operationally suboptimal. You certainly would not be planning a brand new service where you build in purposefully a reversing move for you to then continue. We do have statistics on services that do that today, and it should be noted that there aren't that many of them, and the ones that do it, they're doing it by force, not because they would choose to do so. And in terms of reliability, they are not very reliable. So one of the things that we want to be as East West Rail is start to bring resilience and reliability back into the railway so that people can trust it and be proud of it again. Putting in a reversing move is not going to help that situation at all. You just don't. If you speak to an operations person, they would say, don't do it.
Great, thank you.
Next one on the list is Anna again.
Thank you again. So I just wanted to pick up on the point that Neil Goff was making, which is that this is pre-consultation, and you said go to consultation next year. But at the moment, as you've said, there is only, certainly in your text, there's only really, as far as I can see, the southern route on the table. And it's only in your options map, I think, that option F refers to the northern route. So the point is that up to now, people in the north have not felt it necessary to engage very much with this because they didn't feel they were at threat. But I know as well as you do that it's between the pre-consultation and the consultation period that you choose your route. Now, what I'm slightly concerned about is because you've said, and Neil's alluded to the fact that you will look at the way in which the opinions raised inform your 16 reference points, as it were. But, and you said you won't simply use the number of votes, as it were, one way or another to determine which way you go. But the problem is that, of course, the people in the north have barely realised where you might put it. And there's lots of interesting engineering points that have just been made. But, you know, people in the northern area who would be affected have not really been aware that how it might affect them, because it's only been so recently that it's been put on the table. So my concern is that there's all sorts of very good reasons why one would not want it to be in the north. From my point of view, this would segregate villages which desperately need connection with each other. And you made very good points yourself about the length of track that would need to be on very high embankment and the effect that would have on the landscape in this Fen Edge area, and the fact that some of it is in an area that might flood. So, you know, there's lots of good reasons not to put it here, but the residents may not make those cases in your consultation because up to now they haven't felt that there was a risk of it being sent to the north. And indeed, it's only when they dig deep into your documentation that they find that there is any reference to that. So do you see what I mean? It's, as Neil was alluding to, it's not an even-handed consultation, really. I'm quite relieved about that because it suggests in some ways that you think that another route might be better. But I do see what I mean. It's not, for people, you know, you need to take into account that the people in the north haven't felt at threat as yet. And so that might affect whether they engage with this or not.
Look, I hear the challenge. Just to be clear, we were the prospect of a northern approach into Cambridge was also included in our 2019 consultation. So it was in the 2019 consultation, and we did make sure, you know, again at this consultation, that we do provide the analysis so people can understand that we are looking at it seriously, not that we think it's the right option, but that we are looking at it. And that, again, in the summary document that was sent to everybody living, you know, in the consultation zone, including areas, you know, around the northern route, that it would, that this was a, you know, this was an issue that is set out in our consultation. You know, what we have tried to do is make sure that is transparent and clear, and people are informed about it, but that because the analysis, it doesn't, in our view, support a northern approach based upon what we know right now, that we do make that clear, because that is what the analysis is telling us. So to suggest that it could be either, we don't think is where the analysis is pointing us at the moment, and so we have tried to reflect that. So we do say, you know, our view that this is a southern approach is the one that we stand by, but we've tried to make sure that people you know, are aware that there is another argument we don't buy it. We've analysed it. We don't buy it, but that it is there. And it's trying to find the right way of doing that in a balanced, fair, transparent way. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, thank you.
Ross.
Yes, hello. I've got two questions. One is, there was a community comment this week, which was basically suggesting that it was the reason this line was because to get freight on it out of Felixstowe, and you've basically said that's not the reason. Could you give me one or two sentences that I feed back, which are the primary reasons for this project? Why is it being built? And secondly, I'd really like sort of a commitment from the project that there are going to be some householders who are going to lose their houses about this, and it is going to be absolutely devastating. That the project goes above and beyond and makes sure that the first they know about this isn't when a public consultation opens, that, you know, their hands are held and they're really looked after.
So we were first thing on freight. Look, you know, we're talking about 4 trains an hour in passenger terms, and in freight it's at most 1 freight train per hour. You know, that gives you an idea of whether this is a passenger focused or a freight focused railway. In terms of those who are you know, who stand to lose their homes, that, you know, we're doing everything we can to keep that to an absolute minimum. We, you know, where there were people affected in that way, you know, we had a team on standby. We made to speak to those people directly who had all the knowledge. We're consulting on a particular scheme that makes clear how those people will, you know, how those issues will be sort of handled. And also, you know, we were clear that those people would hear from us first before the consultation went live. And so that was, you know, that has its challenges, because, you know, it does mean some people know about the consultation before the consultation starts in terms of the precise detail of what's in it. But we took the view that the right thing to do was to make sure those people were informed first. So we do take that very seriously, and we recognise it's not just, you know, on that one day when they find out, but it's an ongoing engagement, you know, over what are likely to be months and potentially years as we work through this.
So just going back to, so it's not freight, primary for freight. So is it that the analysis has been done and the passenger demand is so high that that is the reason for this line? Is that, you know, when we say to people, you know, I mean, I yes, I'm very supportive of public transport. That's the way a low carbon future has to work. So yeah, is that, you know,
so the logic is to create that kind of sort of, I guess, what is technically known as an interurban commuter railway. So allowing people to get from home to work, you know, to see their friends and family. You know, that is the logic behind the railway, to make, you know, the whole, you know, to connect up the whole Oxford-Cambridge arc, so that people can get around much more easily, get from home, get to work, make it easier for people to start businesses, so they can get people who can, it makes it easier for people to travel to work and all those sorts of things. That's what sits at the heart of the railway that we're trying to build.
Okay, thank you.
On that point, just to add, Ross, that at the bottom of our consultation site, we have a number of fact sheets which try to kind of like summarize some of like the key main issues that have been raised, and like including like freight, the one that I linked, the route approaching Cambridge, but also kind of benefits of East West Rail, which you might find very useful for your constituents. Then next one on the list is Eileen again.
Thank you. Following on from Neil and Anna, I wanted to ask if somehow, hypothetically, the northern route became a preferred option after this round of consultation, would there be a similar level of consultation on that route, so that, because as people have said, people in the northern villages haven't really focused on the potential northern option. So I would hope that they would have the same opportunities that people who are focusing on the southern option at the moment to actually respond to a consultation on a potential northern option.
So we will bring forward our sort of basically our final proposals for a statutory consultation, and normally the way that works is, the proposals in that consultation are very, very close to the proposals that end up in the DCO submission. There might be some minor changes, but nothing as material as changing from a southern approach to a northern approach, such that you wouldn't have, there wouldn't be an opportunity to comment on it, and therefore I think you can rest assured that if it did become the preferred option, there would be that opportunity at statutory consultation for people to feed back on. I think that is fair to assume.
So just to confirm, it would be a consultation process like the one we've got at the moment on the southern route, with the
so there would be
route.
Technically it's a statutory rather than a non-statutory consultation,
right.
But for all intents and purposes it would be the same kind of exercise, and it would be for the same sort of period of time, and it would operate in much the same way. Yes.
Right, thank you.
Actually linked to kind of a very similar question from Eva, who asks, can you give any examples of what would need to change within the analysis for a northern approach to Cambridge to become the East-West Rail's preferred option?
It's very hard to sort of isolate it to a number of sort of things, to an individual thing, because we do have those 15 assessment factors. But if there were a material change in the assessment factors, either in relation to the way the northern route performed, or for that matter, the way the southern route performed against those assessment factors, that would be what it would take to tip the balance. But as it isn't just, if the environmentals change or if the costs change, or it is the balance of those 15 factors. And I know that's not the simple answer that you'd like me to give, but that is the truth in terms of the way the way those factors are analysed.
Then I think next one on the list is Fiona.
Yes, originally I was going to just make the same point that Neil made, which then Anna made, just the fact that an awful lot of our residents, having looked at the consultation document, don't think there's a problem. So yes, there will be many, many more people writing from the south. But then as you were talking, another question came to mind, which was, if there really is only one freight train per hour and the rest will be passenger trains, I'm wondering what the economic case for this line is now post-COVID, when there really will be fewer train journeys. Is this a big worry for you?
So I think, I look at it sort of in three ways. I think the first thing to say is that the railway, is likely to be opening, towards or at the end of this decade, and I think there is some expectation that rail numbers may well have recovered by that point. But that gets me to the second point, which is it is quite, at the moment, knowing what future rail demand looks like is tricky, and so therefore we are modeling a number of different scenarios for what that might mean. The one thing I would say is that some rail projects are, so for example, what Crossrail does is it takes a network that is full to bursting and puts extra capacity to make existing journeys possible in a different way. Whereas what East West Rail does is it opens up new rail connections that don't presently exist. It's not about boosting capacity on existing links, it's about new connectivity. And I think the implication is of that is, schemes that provide new connectivity, are likely to fare better, because it's about connectivity, not capacity. Now, the one thing I would say, though, is that before we get to the final investment decision where government commits to spend the money on East West Rail, there are 2 business case stages where we have to go through, and we do have to demonstrate the value for money of investing in the railway. So we will do the modelling and all those things. I remain confident. I think, and the Prime Minister said yesterday in the House of Commons that, I think Anthony asked him about, a new business case. Look, we are, we will continue to test the business case. Of course we will. But I think there is confidence that, there is a strong case for the railway, but recognising that, we will continue to test that.
I think, Will, if I can just add one other thing to that as well, which is, railways are around for 100 years. And I think we're all crossing fingers that what we've just seen is a blip that's gone on. It's not to say that something else won't happen in the future. And when you're looking at 100-year plus planning, then it's very important that whilst you take these events into account, you've got to take them into account at the right weight. This is not about the railway is just going to operate for 2 years after COVID. And so that's another factor that will be taken into account into the business case.
Thank you.
Then I think next one is Farouk.
Yeah, hello. 2 questions. One is following on from Fiona. So I work on a company for Science Park at the moment, and only 3% of our employees would like to go back full time. So the COVID stance is a huge effect. That's one. And the other one is also, I wanted to ask, North Stowe Town Council has only been formed 2 weeks ago. I sit on North Stowe Town Council as well as the County Council, but you've only been in touch with us once, and the consultation ends in 10 days, maybe a little bit more. Were you considering getting a consultation with the Town Council at all?
So I'd need to check with Geordie, because I think we probably do try to invite parish and town councils to events like these. I don't know whether North Stowe Town Council was invited tonight, Geordie, but we can, if that isn't the case, we can certainly arrange to have a conversation with them.
Yeah, because it's very important, because in 2019, when the consultation first came in about a northern route, there was probably only about 300 houses. We're now nearly 1,000 houses. And the fact that we won't have a say in what goes through our neighbourhood is quite a big concern, really. Can I suggest that we get something in with North Stowe Town Council? We haven't been emailed at all.
The one thing I do know is that everybody who lives in the consultation zone will have had one of the summary documents through the post. So hopefully that will have helped to promote awareness. But if the town council is new and that's been formed during consultation, then I'm sure, Geordie, we can make sure we follow up and have a conversation with the clerk or the chair of the town council or whatever. We can do that.
Then next question was from Judith around, can you not just publish the numbers on the 2 southern approaches which you are really asking about, namely Camborne South and Camborne North routes into Cambridge South?
I'm just trying to understand, Judith, in terms of when you say the numbers, what do you mean?
I'm going back to your point from a while ago about publishing numbers of who preferred which route. I know you said it's not a referendum, it's not counting votes, but we all know that the numbers are going to be kind of high for the northern route, which is in an appendix, buried in the documentation. And of course, everybody on the southern route is much more exercised about this because of the southern preferences. So if you are saying, as you know, people with the professional judgment and your list of criteria, that you are really kind of consulting on those two southern options, wouldn't it be kind of fairer or more transparent to actually say, well, this is the feedback we've had on these, because that's surely what is going to be influencing potentially which one is used, which one goes to the consultation.
So I think it's fair to say that you know, we'll try to represent the sort of the feedback that we've got as fairly as we can. What we don't ask in the consultation, because the northern approach isn't a consultation option, as it were, we don't ask people to provide us the same quantitative analysis of that in the same way that we do the northern approach. The northern approach is open for people to comment on. So therefore, in terms of the way we play back that information through the consultation, you know, that probably will influence the way that we do that. So I do take your point on that.
So it's like your survey results will detail a lot more on the preferences between the two southern routes.
They're likely to do so simply because they are two of our shortlisted options, as opposed to the northern approach, which isn't one of our preferred options.
Right. I was hoping it wasn't really an option at all.
So I think it's fair to say it's not one of our shortlisted alignment options in the consultation. It isn't that. So our preference is not to take the northern approach into Cambridge.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So we're nearing the end of the time that we have for this session, but we're going to try and cover. I think like there's a couple of two people, yes, that have requested, three actually. So we're going to tackle those three. So Philippa first.
Thank you. Yes, I think conversations at the Stitches group are quite useful. And one of the reasons that people were getting quite cross about the southern route, these are people from Shelford, was that they got the impression that people hadn't looked properly at the northern route. It's easy to get that impression from this document because it doesn't really mention it. Now, if I read this, there's plenty of detail to tell me what's wrong with the northern route. But I wouldn't have known how to do that without the detail. And I must admit, I function on paper better anyway. So if the consultation on the south does at least in some place mention that really good scrutiny was made of the northern route, there will be some people who are reassured by that and feel it's fairer. Do you see what I mean? Because I think it's what is also adding to the strength of feeling against the southern route is the fact that they assume that the northern route hasn't been looked at properly, because they're just catching up, they're just paying attention now in 2021. They're not aware of what you were up to in 2019. I hope that people think that's fair comment.
No.
Yeah. And just an observation, I like seeing freight trains going by, because when I'm standing on my allotment, seeing them chug across, because I think that's a whole lot less lorries on the road. But following up on what Marcus was querying, are people going to be disturbed by night rail? I'm not convinced, but I would be open to that. I think that sometime down the line, it's going to be useful to put freight on. And I was always taught that was the best place to put it, as we've done without our canals lately. Just the thought.
And to your point, I will, we will make sure, because our position is clear. We have done the appropriate amount of analysis on the northern route. That's been our position, all along. But we will make sure that is communicated. It is, I was doing one of these sessions with the with people from the south earlier today, and I was making the case that we have done the proper analysis.
Yeah, if I may, sorry, I still haven't got muted, sorry. I mean, one way is to do a quick QR code part of your consultation and have the maps that are in this one available for somebody who's interested. You obviously can't include everything in the consultation, but just references back will make people realise there was a lot of work went into it.
That's a helpful suggestion.
The fair-minded will hopefully feel that's fair.
Thanks. So final two. So Claire was next, and she wanted to raise a question around freight east of Cambridge.
Okay. Thank you, Jodie. First of all, you to Will. You mentioned Anthony by name. I presume that you're referring to Anthony Brown, MP for Cambridge South. There is also another MP, Lucy Fraser.
Yes.
I guess that you've taken her into account as well, have used into account.
Yes, so we've been in touch with Lucy through the consultation.
Yeah, but you specifically mentioned Anthony by first name. And really my question concerns freight to the east of Cambridge. And I'd just like you to comment on the use of the line east of Cambridge and the increase in freight there.
So look, I think so as to reassure you that we've had a number of conversations with Lucy. So I think we are, I've met her, our chief exec has met her, and in the run-up to the consultation, we made sure she had all the briefings as well that she needed. So we definitely are engaging with MPs easily. Sorry, equally rather than easily. In terms of the approach, in terms of east of Cambridge, there are at present, there are, the capacity of the rail network east of Cambridge is not as high, and therefore there are limits to how much freight can travel on it in order to get to East West Rail. That is simply where we are today, and there are key areas where that's the case. Ultimately, it'll be for the department. It'll be for Network Rail or Great British Railways, to work with the Department for Transport to take a view on how and when and if it wants to upgrade that capacity.
Okay, so there's no question then that there will be a huge increase in freight to the east of Cambridge.
So it's difficult to see that there will be a huge increase given the capacity of the railway as it stands today.
Okay, thanks.
Then final two questions, Simon and Sherry, either.
It's Simon. Can we just either rule in or rule out this question of freight? Because ultimately it depends on the height clearances that you're going to design for. So if you're going to be taking freight from Felixstowe through to Daventry International Rail Freight Terminal, for example, the companies will want to have maximum height clearances for the largest containers possible. That's how that business works. So will you be able to accommodate the highest containers that the other freight routes are already designed to accommodate? And then we know whether or not you could become a serious player in the freight business. In other words, is it designed in for you to accommodate the maximum containers to make, which are therefore become a competitor in the freight business?
So we have designed not to preclude freight, but I'll hand over to Paul, who may well have more detail than I do on the precise clearances.
So in terms of the gauge that we are designing to, it's W12 gauge. So that is the largest gauge to be able to accommodate any service that currently exists on the UK rail network.
Right. So in other words, you could compete for freight traffic. You could become a commercial freight railway.
Well, freight doesn't really work like that in terms of how the contracts work. What is worked out is we're predominantly, as Will has said, a passenger railway with 4 trains an hour. And after that, there may be some spare parts, as there are on the network rail infrastructure. And then it's down to the freight operating companies to come up with their own business cases and their own models as to what should be run. However, that said, we've still got more work to be done on East West Rail as to how track access operations are going to work going forward. But right now, given that we're at an early stage of the project, designing to W12 gauge and making sure that we're not accidentally designing something out that we would want to then include later on is just a sensible way of doing it. Network Rail does the same with their projects. They go to W12 gauge whenever they're installing new infrastructure.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that.
We go with the final question, who's going to be from Neil. Neil Guff.
Thank you. Can I just outline a scenario and seek assurance that this won't happen? Is that as a result of this consultation, there's a sort of hue and outcry from the south. It causes a shift in the preference to the north. And then we end up with a statutory consultation on essentially a northern alignment alone, upon which our residents will not feel they've had adequate opportunity to consult with in the same way as the southern route. Can you just assure us that that will not happen?
So I can absolutely assure you that there will not be a move to a northern approach without those living in the north being appropriately consulted and having the opportunity to comment on that approach from the north. So that we can be absolutely clear on that. But I do think it, and that isn't, and to be clear, that wouldn't be to say, well, this consultation acts on that basis, because it would be, the consultation would be on a preferred option on the north if that were to be the case. But I think it is sort of important that we don't lose sight of the fact that we are putting information out there in relation to the analysis that we have done, and we are we have included the approach, the communities affected by approach to Cambridge and from the north in this consultation. So I do encourage people who are in the consultation zone to respond to the consultation. I think we should create the impression that you can just ignore this one, but I can reassure you that we wouldn't get to a submission for DCO that was a northern approach into Cambridge without the public being consulted on that as a preferred option.
Right, but you're not ruling out a single statutory consultation on a northern option.
Well, ultimately, until we do the analysis, that's not something I can rule out, because we're required to back check the decisions as we go.
Right, but I'm sure you appreciate how that would lurch from consultation on a number of options to the south, all of which get binned to a statutory consultation on northern.
That's right, but that's why we would be consulting the public.
Yeah, but not just at the statutory stage, right? So I can imagine, you can imagine what the reaction would be if that scenario took place.
I take your point. but I do just want to also make sure that people are being consulted in this consultation, and we do encourage people to respond.
So,
Yeah, I know.
So Will, to pick up on what Neil was saying, and you know we're very exercised about this, I have put my question in the chat. The point being is you're doing a non-statutory pre-consultation at the moment, at which point you only have the southern routes on the table. If something, and you said if new evidence comes to light that makes you readjust your view and the weightings of the 16 factors, and you come up in the next few months, or when you've analysed the outcomes of these consultations, if you come up with a decision that you think actually you might change your preference to the north, you need to do another pre-statutory consultation with us before you go to the statutory consultation, which will only be looking at one route. Now, do you undertake to do that?
So I think what I'm saying is that there will be an appropriate opportunity to consult. If we were to make such a change, bluntly, we're going to need to have a look at what our consultation approach is. And you'll forgive me because I am one of the directors. These things would need to be considered by the leadership team, the board, the government, take legal advice and all those sorts of things. So you'll forgive me if I'm not going to give an absolutely definitive answer now. But what I am saying, the thing I am committing to, is that there is no scenario in which the northern approach into Cambridge becomes what is in the DCO submission without the public being properly consulted.
Well, that's obvious, isn't it? Because you won't stand a chance in the DCO process if there hasn't been a consultation. So that's I think we can all bank that. I think Anna's sort of hit the nail on the head. Really, it's whether you, and I think you would find it very difficult to avoid repeating the consultation if you went to the north. I guess as the in some ways you haven't seen anything yet if that were the approach for what the public reaction would be, but that I think Anna's right.
The point I'm making is that I know this process, and it goes pre-consultation, big pause while people analyse the data, and then at the consultation, the formal statutory consultation, you are consulting on your preferred option. Now, what I'm saying is at the moment, you've only looked at the southern ones on the text, and people who are in the north will not have engaged with that because they have not recognised that you are considering the north. So if something happens between now and next year, when you said you'd do the statutory consultation, you need to undertake this same process again in order to consult. And I'm taking it from you, Will, that is what you've said you'll do. But what I appreciate is that may not be part of the statutory process. And so you may be promising something which isn't possible. So I'm very fearful that you might just possibly come back with a statutory consultation only on the northern route, and we won't have had a chance to discuss it. And that really would be an extremely unfortunate way to proceed. And I'm sure
I believe me, Anna, I recognise the argument. Ultimately, our responsibility, to Neil's point, if we want to have, if we want to be in a strong position going into the DCO, we need to demonstrate that we've consulted appropriately. But you'll forgive me that if such a material change were to happen, I'm not tonight going to commit to precisely what our consultation strategy would be, because ultimately, it's not only my decision. It'll go through a series of considerations with our board and those sorts of things. And I just, I can't commit to precisely what the process would be today, but I am saying there would be appropriate consultation.
Thank you.
We'll quote you on that, Will.
Brilliant. So I think on that note, and actually mindful that we've overrun by quite a few minutes, I think we can draw the session to a close. So if we can have the slides back, and I think Will can walk us through the next steps.
So this really is just a reminder that we do want people, right across the consultation zone to respond to the consultation. If we just flick onto the next slide, just a reminder that we do have those live chat events, 4 more events on Saturday, and then on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week. And then finally, again, just a sort of quick reminder in terms of responding to the consultation, you can do that online, you can do it via email, or you can do it via free post. And we do want an ongoing conversation, to the discussion that we've just been having, and I'm genuinely not trying to be evasive. We do want to have an ongoing conversation such that were there to be any changes, they don't take people by surprise. And so maintaining a dialogue is really important for us. So do keep in touch. If people have got questions or anything else like that, do email us at contact@eastwestrail.co.uk, or if you call us on the number that's there, 0330 134 0067. So thank you very much for your time today. I really do appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.